And oh man, all of this led to maybe I need to rate this thing a freaking 5. This is bad. Welcome to the Weekly Fix podcast, where we're just two friends talking about our passions within movies, TV shows, gaming, and comics. Thanks for checking out the podcast. We hope you like it. Hello and welcome to Weekly Fix. I'm your co-host Zane. Joined with me is Jacob, and we are excited for another review episode of the Weekly Fix. We have a complete season of The Last of Us Season 2 that just dropped. I think it completed last Sunday, and we are here to review it. So I'm incredibly excited to talk about this show, as I have a ton to say, which I know if you are a listener of this podcast, you are not surprised because I always have an opinion. But before we get into our opinions on what we thought of The Last of Us Season 2, Jacob, how about you tell us how you are doing and how your weekend was?
Oh, I'm doing great. It was another great weekend. And, you mentioned having a lot to say. I think it's funny when we think back to earlier in our podcasting career, how we used to be like, man, is just doing one review, are we going to have enough to talk about? And then we cut to last week and we talked about Andor Season 2 for like an hour and a half. So I'm super excited for this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Another great show in the books. I'm excited more so for Season 3, but we'll get into a little bit of that as we move forward. But yeah, it was a great weekend.
Okay, good. Now, I know a little bit of a sore spot I'm going to bring up, and I'm sorry about that. But, Jacob, how are the playoffs treating you?
Man, the Knicks finally got eliminated. It was about time. They did overachieve, I would think, this year. I think a lot of us, our expectations were Eastern Conference Finals with the team that we put together. We did get there, but having to go through the Boston Celtics, the defending champs, I don't think any of us true Knicks fans really thought we were going to make that a series. And then to go in and win the way that we did, I think that was exciting. I'm more excited for next year, though, obviously, now that we're out. And there is a little bit of a trend in the Eastern Conference Final. I think the last 5 years, the team that's been eliminated in the Eastern Conference Finals the year before ends up going to the finals. So if we can continue that trend, yes, the Knicks will be in the finals next year. So if anyone were to break that trend, it would be the Knicks. But I'm going to hold out hope for this offseason that, we're a sure shot for the NBA finals next year.
Okay. That's a pretty good stat to potentially be bringing up. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's better than nothing, right? It's better than, I would rather be in the Eastern Conference Finals than not have made the playoffs at all. So I know a lot of people are, making fun of the Knicks, like, oh, they're so excited just to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. But hey, anytime you can make it that far into the season, it's a pretty good year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, a stellar run, and they were fun to watch. That is probably the best thing I can say, is that watching the Knicks was just fun. And I had, a little bit of fan service in there just for me, getting to watch Deuce McBride play. So anytime I get to cheer on a former person that I cheered for, that's always fun.
Well, the Knicks are fun because you never know if they're going to come back from 20 or if they're going to blow a 20-point lead. So it always keeps you on your toes. You can never turn the game off. And I think that definitely shined throughout this postseason.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Very unpredictable. The way the game's playing right now, no one's safe. And I kind of like that. I like that no lead is safe and that no team can really kind of chill with how the game is currently being played in the NBA.
Yeah, so many shots go up. They say the 3-point line is now the great equalizer, and it definitely holds true with how many shots they are getting up nowadays.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I had a pretty good weekend myself. We got to get some friends come in to visit that we hadn't seen in a long time, so that was absolutely wonderful. I had a pretty good week. I had a pretty good work week last week as well. Put in a lot of hours, but got a little bit of recognition, which was pretty cool from our commanding officer. So that was a shining point. And then I got to play 2 sessions of D&D, which, I was very happy with. A fun game yesterday, making some progress in the campaign. So that was also fun.
Yeah, I think it's been like a highlight. It's so hard. We've had such a hard time scheduling our D&D sessions, but whenever we all can get on, schedule and all get on the same page, it's such a fun time. So yeah, yesterday was a really great time for that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, without further ado, I hope you have been watching The Last of Us, and I am talking to our viewers here, not to Jacob, because I know that you have watched the entire season, but it is a pretty decisive season. We lost a ton of viewers for The Last of Us this year, and I'm excited to hear what Jacob's thoughts are on that. especially with how we are kind of, I don't know, how we're kind of going with this season. A lot of themes that were discussed and approached in this are potentially controversial for some, but for others, they loved it. So a very divisive season. And I think we're going to get into the non spoilers first. Jacob, overall story and pacing is kind of what I want to jump in first. How did you feel about the story and pacing of The Last of Us?
So for me personally, my perspective is probably going to be a little bit different than you, but you still might feel the same way that I feel about it, just because I feel like the general consensus, even for those that haven't played the games, has still felt this way. I think the pacing was really, really bad. And I say that just obviously coming from a point of knowing where the story goes and what's coming up next. The fact that this was only a 7 episode season, I think really, really hurts this show because while this is, the second game is a good bit longer than the first game. When you have a show like this and you're trying to compare them apples to apples, we can sit down and play the entire game in one sitting, right? You can knock out the game in a weekend or something like that. With a show, however, the fact that we're getting to this point that we're at and we're going to have to wait for, let's say, 2 years, probably at the minimum, with how production is on these types of things nowadays, the show's definitely not going to have a third season come out next year. So I think minimum 2 years, with it potentially being even longer, I think that makes this pacing really, really bad. Other than that, though, there were some things that I did enjoy. I think the visuals of the show are still incredible. I think every episode looks like a movie, which is very nice. I do appreciate the episode length in a show like this, which, if you guys know anything about me, usually I don't like when shows are just long for the sake of being long. I don't feel like I have that issue with this show. I appreciate the entire time that we get each week with it. The world is still awesome. I think that's probably one of the shining points of The Last of Us. Very cool world. The story is still good, but it does definitely come from that point of the second game not being as good as the first game. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that we've already experienced through the game. And you mentioned the viewership starting to fall off. I think that's really right in line with how the game was received. A lot of people hopped on it, got to a certain point, really didn't like it, and a lot of people didn't even finish the game. Now, obviously, millions of people still did, but by the end of it, a lot of people were disappointed and stuff like that. So second season is about right in line with how the second game was. So I'm not super surprised to kind of hear the things that are, being talked about now.
Which makes sense. I mean, anytime the creators kind of have a agenda going forward, then it's a little divisive, then it's definitely going to drive some viewership away from, or some player base away from, the people who enjoyed the first one. Especially since I think this one kind of veers a little bit away from the hero's journey and kind of, without getting into any spoilers, doesn't really have the same heart that the first one did. Now, as far as pacing for me, I with the story they were trying to tell, if this is a story they were trying to tell, I really don't have too much trouble with the pacing. They just didn't tell anything. And that's
Mhm.
my problem is, we're at episode 3 and we're not even to, honestly, episode 3 was the worst pacing. The fact that nothing happened after the biggest episode in probably TV that we've gotten in a while drops, and then we just have a complete nothing burger of an episode. That's pretty rough. I feel like that could have been half an episode, and we could have combined episodes 3 and 4 into one, and really would have helped this show drastically. We could have spent more time in Seattle, telling more story, and maybe even not in the way that we did end. So, as far as pacing, I wasn't too upset because there's 3 episodes in here I think that have phenomenal pacing, like very very solid. The rest I feel like is just a little weak. So without diving into spoilers, I think that's all I can say on pacing. But for pacing for me, it was I just I just don't think they had enough story to span 7 hours of content.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, fair to say, and, maybe I should go, like, I don't necessarily think that the pacing per episode was bad. I think just knowing the whole story and what they tried to make a whole season of a show is where I have the pacing issue, and you kinda hinted at it a little bit, feeling like there was a couple episodes that nothing happened, and that's kind of the issues that I have is, like, just knowing where we're getting to and what we're going to go into, like, that's where you wanna get to, I feel like, as quick as possible, and it felt like almost that this season should have been cut in half. And the next part of where the game does to take up and where ultimately the story is going to continue should have started to flow into this season. But unfortunately, we did get these 7 episodes of kind of feeling like you mentioned it was episode 3 or was episode 4, after the big moment. That does feel like an episode that really should not have been. How long was it? Probably an hour and 10 minutes, which has how long a lot of these episodes are. So I kind of agree with that. I feel like the pacing per episode wasn't necessarily bad. I just feel like the pacing for a series like this was poor.
Yeah, no, and you nailed it on the head there. It definitely had its moments of great pacing, and these creators know what they're doing because we saw the first season, and I think the first season was phenomenal. They covered a lot of ground, a ton of time, and they gave a complete and total full story. That just didn't happen here. So if you haven't watched The Last of Us season 2 yet, and you are hoping for another complete story like we got in the first season, you're not going to get it. And that was kind of heartbreaking to me to kind of see where we left off to end with. I kind of realized that was going to happen around episode 5. I was like, okay, so we got 2 episodes left. There is 0 chance that we are getting pretty much any resolution. And then episode 6 was a flashback and made 0 progress with the story. And I was like, oh, okay, so even less. So I definitely didn't love the pacing of the season as a whole. But
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
That just goes back to the point, kind of like I was referencing before. It's like it is hard to make video games into shows. It's not ever really been successful. I mean, we've seen it with movies in the past too. It's really just kind of gotten to a point now where, let's say, the last 3 or 4 years that we've actually seen video game adaptations become successful and become very popular. Because if you think about like what a video game is, there's a lot of time that you spend just wandering around, just doing random stuff. And when you don't have, you can't just do that in a show, right? You can't just have a character literally, searching for gear and like stuff like that, because that would be really boring watching them go and loot through all these little filing cabinets and stuff. And I almost wish they would have just taken like a step back and realized like, hey, we're not going, like, what we're wanting to get at with this second season of the show isn't really enough for a whole season. So why don't we go ahead and kind of just get through that part and then get into the next part where things start to actually happen. And it just feels like they almost ignored that part of it, which is like the biggest frustration for me.
Yeah, and it's scary to think that they won't even give the kind of answer to the finale until potentially season 4. Because a lot of people are saying that season 3 won't resolve the cliffhanger that we got dropped either. And I think that's just bad writing.
Yeah, and it goes back to my thing, it is hard to make video games good in shows. And this is where I was saying why the video game works, because you can't sit down and play it all at once, right? You don't have to wait. Potentially, with that, what you just said, we might be, 4 years before we get a resolution to the show. And, you're sitting on this cliffhanger and then you get this next season and potentially it doesn't even get resolved then. And then we go another 2 years. It feels like people that haven't played the games, they might almost become uninterested a little bit, which is one of my biggest concerns for the show moving forward, is you don't want people to get bored and be like, well, I don't want to wait another 4 years for something like this. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully, I'm only feeling this way, personally, just because I know what's coming. I hope people that don't are like still excited about what is to come. I just feel like leaving it like that, though, it goes back to what you said. Season 1 is a complete story. Season 2 isn't. And that's really hard. And that's one of the things we rate pretty highly when we're talking about movies and shows and stuff. Can you watch this by itself and it still makes sense? And I don't feel like this season you really can.
No, I agree with that. This is just spoiler alert for my rating. I think this is a massive drop in quality from the first season. But so you touched on visuals a little bit. I want to talk about that a little bit. So you said the visuals look fantastic. And do you think that the visuals were consistent throughout the entire season?
Thinking back on it, I don't really have a moment in my mind that like stood out that took me out of a scene. I think I enjoyed just about all the areas where we in. I did catch myself a few times even being like, wow, that looks really cool. Like I think about the part, I don't think this is a spoiler because it's a big, point of the show. It's a location, right? When they show up in Seattle, for the first time, and we kind of get like a look at Seattle. I thought that looked really good, and you can obviously tell it's the CGI and stuff like that. Like Seattle don't really look like that, but I still think it looked cool, and it kind of does put you in that zone of like, man, what would a post-apocalyptic world really look like? And I feel like they really nail it on the head with like that. I feel like when you're watching the show, you're like, oh, this probably is what it would look like. It would look similarly to this. I never really felt like it was inconsistent. I felt like most of the scenes looked really good for what they were trying to portray, but sometimes I'm not as picky on that as you are.
Yeah, I'm a picky boy. Now, I think for the most part, especially front loaded, the season looks phenomenal. I know I was comparing this to Daredevil Born Again and how good this show looked, especially
Mm.
episode 2 compared to some of what we had been getting. And that holds true for the most part. However, I think it's so funny that in the finale, to me it seems like they cut the budget. It seems like they may have run out of time because when character 1 and character 2 are standing on top of the building and looking out over Seattle, I personally, to me, I think it looks significantly worse than most of the other show. And then when character 1 is crossing the open water, I'm like, man, that water just like I don't know, like it to me, it kind of took me out of it in those two moments specifically. And that was just on the finale. For the rest of the show, like I think they did phenomenal. I just think like in those moments, and it was the water specifically, and then it definitely when character 1 and character 2 were up in the building overlooking the city, that definitely to me looked so green screen it was painful. So now that could be me just because I'm picky, but for those two moments, it just seemed inconsistent with the rest of the show, and honestly took me out of it for a moment.
I feel like what really my frustration with when you talk about like visuals and stuff, and every show does this, but you can tell when they like are trying to save money, we get those really like dark scenes, and sometimes those are to build emotion and to build like anxiousness and anticipation for things because you don't know what's around the corner. It's dark, you can't really see. I get all of that, but sometimes it is a little frustrating when it's almost you feel like it's dark because they're trying to hide stuff. Now that is some of the stuff that I had issues with. I didn't necessarily think it looked bad, but you're talking about the open water scene. Yeah, it's nighttime. I get all that. That's when I felt like they were trying to hide, maybe some bad editing or some bad CGI and stuff. Is they were using just darkness to kind of like drown your eyes away from like center corners of the screen to like, oh, you can't really see what's in the corner because it's pitch black up there. Those are the things that frustrate me so more so with this season than like the actual looks of those things, because overall I didn't really have any issues like that with it. That's when I started to be like, why is it so dark in this scene? And I get it, like it's like a anxious building show, like that you want the viewers to be like a little nervous and a little worried about what's about to happen, but sometimes it's just like it's just dark for the sake of being dark, and that's what I didn't like as much.
That's actually funny because so me and my wife we got a new TV, and the new TV is really good. It was our present to each other for Christmas, and actually didn't have that feeling of it being dark, but I know if I watched it on my other TV that I wouldn't have even been able to see the character like at all. I would have just been watching a black screen, which I
Yeah.
think is hilarious.
Yeah, and like I feel like I could see like the characters good. Like I feel like the center of the screen was fine. I didn't have any issues with that. I just feel like some parts of it they were like trying to hide certain things. It's like one of those moments like you hear all the time about, oh, if you go back to this scene in this movie, you can see someone left like a Starbucks cup in the screen or like something like that. I felt like I was almost like looking for like, why did they make this part so dark? Like what did
That's
they
funny.
like not catch when they were editing it? They're like, hey, we need to hide that. So I feel like that was like where I felt like it. And again, it didn't look bad. I just hate when scenes like do that just to like, it almost feels like they're just being cheap with it. And I don't think this show necessarily was. I think they, probably just wanted it to look dark to build that anticipation and stuff. But sometimes like I'm like, I just don't want it to be that dark. It's like frustrating.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely get that. And I would agree with that in that moment. So pretty solid on the visuals overall. I have a few complaints. I think the undead look spectacular. I
Yep.
think that for the most part they did a really solid job, but I did have those two moments that really took me out of it. And unfortunately that was at the end of the show. So it wasn't something that I like isn't fresh on my mind. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
watched that 4 weeks ago and kind of forgot. So that is the only complaint visually I have are those two, but overall phenomenal visuals. Probably like a 9 out of 10 visually for me. Just docking it in those moments that really took me out of it. So we talked about pacing, we talked about visuals. I do want to touch on acting before we get into story. And story we'll touch on real quick before we jump into spoilers because it's almost impossible to talk about the story. But how did you feel like the acting was this season with the uh, potential missing our leading man?
Yeah, so I feel like this season the acting was good. It definitely felt like a step back from season one, and I think that's really like it's hard to talk about the show without that spoiler because so much of the show is built off what happens in that moment. But I feel like I didn't mind Bella Ramsey as Ellie as much in the first season, and at the beginning of season two, I felt like she was portraying the role well. But when we do get to the moment where she's officially like the lead of the show, I feel like she can't carry it in the same way that we see someone like Pedro Pascal carry the show. And I think that's, not necessarily fair to her, to Bella Ramsey, because I think Pedro Pascal is one of the best actors there are right now. I mean, he's incredible. So it's really hard to pit somebody against potentially, some might even argue, the best actor we have right now. It's not really a fair argument, but it is really frustrating when you do go from, that to a little bit of a letdown. And that's not saying she did a bad job. I think she portrayed Ellie in the way that even the game wanted you to think Ellie was. There's a little bit of a part where I'm like, this is when the game and being a TV show, it's hard to make work. But overall, I thought the acting was still very well. I think the supporting roles really shined. I think Dina did a fantastic job. I forget the name of her actor right now, but she's going to be in Superman also.
Isabella Merkt.
Yeah, her. I think she did fantastic. I loved when she was on the screen. I think Jesse's character, one of my favorites. I thought he was always fun to have on the screen.
Yeah, young
Tommy,
Mazzino.
yeah, Tommy was great. I think he was fantastic. I thought all the supporting roles were really, really good. One thing I think that it's a little bit annoying that we didn't get to this season because there are some things I don't like about the casting, and we'll probably get into that a little bit. But I feel like Caitlin Devers does a really, really good job as Abby. I think she's a fantastic actress, and I'm excited to continue to get to see more of her in the upcoming seasons. But overall, I think it was good. I think really just the biggest letdown for me was Bella Ramsey. And again, I don't necessarily think she did a bad job. I just don't think she does a great job of portraying emotion in certain scenes. And I feel like those are like, in a show like this that is pretty emotionally driven, I feel like that's like very important. And I feel like she just let us down a little bit there.
Yeah, I saw somebody post on Instagram and they were like, how can Pixels display more emotion than Bella Ramsey? And it
Yeah.
was like it was a clip from the video game where she was injured and getting treated.
Mm.
And it literally like the picture held true, like honestly. And I didn't know if I just really dislike Ellie as a character or if I
Hmm.
think the acting is terrible. Because I'm kind of leaning towards both. First off, I don't think that she's doing a good job with her, but also I hate her character. I think she's awful. Like I do not like what they have done with this character. It doesn't make sense for me. And so it's really hard to separate what I'm seeing in the show as either writing or poor acting. And so we've seen her do decent in the show, and like you said, like she's not world class acting by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think that she has been terrible. I just feel like this character that she's been given, especially me, who we all know that I'm a goody boy. I like Captain America. I like it black and white. So I'm over here like, dude, this is the worst protagonist I've ever seen in my life. And so it's pretty difficult for me to kind of deal with watching her on screen. And part of my issues with this season, so was either her or the writing. I don't know which one, but overall, supporting cast was phenomenal. I do think Dina's actress Isabella was phenomenal. I think she's probably the best performance in season two, and she gets a plethora of screen time
Hmm.
every time that we get the return of Joel. I just I'm so happy that he's back on screen. Pedro is phenomenal, and he continues to carry the show every time that he steps, like he's in the screen. I'm like, yes, thank goodness we're
Mhm.
back focused on him. And so I really just enjoy time with Joel. And so, but like you said, most everybody else did a great job. And so I don't have too much complaints with the acting. However, sadly, my biggest complaint is with the lead of the show, which really knocks it down quite a bit.
Yeah.
But again, could be story, could be acting. But without further ado, and tuning in, I just want a brief overview of the story without diving too much into it. Just like, did you like it? Did you kind of did you vibe with it? I know with pacing we didn't get as much as you wanted, but how did you feel about the story of this season?
Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, I was a little frustrated with the story this season. Just I feel like we didn't get enough accomplished for this to be a whole season. So that being said, it's definitely not going to get good points for me when it comes to the story. Now, for people that haven't played the games, I know there have been some people that did enjoy it some. And my wife is one of those people that obviously hasn't played the games, and she didn't really like it as much either. It just feels like nothing happened. Like we obviously get to the Seattle and all that stuff, no spoilers yet, which is kind of the point of this season, I guess. But they make the journey to Seattle in one episode, right? Like, not even it doesn't even take them a whole episode to get there. They don't run into any trouble on the way there. They just kind of get there, and so like I'll explain a little bit more about that now that we're past this part in the game when we get to the spoiler stuff. But there's just a lot that I think should have just been kind of not necessarily rushed through, but that didn't need as much as we got of it. And so that's where my complaint with the story comes in. I just don't feel like this was deserving of a full season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And then there's other aspects of the story that just don't resonate with me, so I don't love what they're doing with it. The entire story from the get-go is a I don't know if it's a critique on vengeance or forgiveness, but they kind of deal with it in a way that personally I just can't resonate with. I can't understand, I can't comprehend. Now we are in the like a post-apocalyptic world, but when like some of these things just don't make sense without Jesus in your life. And so when you have the moral compass of, Jesus Christ is your savior, then some of these things just kind of like flow out of you, obviously. And for someone who lives in a post-apocalyptic world where like those values kind of go by the wayside, I don't really get how you kind of get some of those lessons tied in, and we don't see any lessons in this from my point of view. uh at the conclusion of season 2, just a heads up, maybe a slight spoiler there, but even like we're not seeing really the best parts of this. So maybe they'll fix that in the future, maybe not. And then the entire story tying in, this is not a spoiler because we've talked about it a bunch, but Ellie tapping into her LGBT roots, even more so for me, is a big knock on every time she's on screen, because that has taken the forefront of the show, and it's just kind of like and it's a part of our world now, and I get that, but it doesn't make me enjoy it. So, for me, it you can if this is something that somebody out there really enjoys and loves, then that's okay for them. But for me, it's just gonna really knock the points off, and I'm just not gonna enjoy it. So, that really hurt my viewing of this season, along with the other parts of the story that I think were a knock that we'll talk about more in spoilers.
Yeah, for sure.
So, before we get to spoilers, though, I do want to ask what your rating for this season was. So those that haven't tapped in, maybe they can jump in and see what we're talking about, see how it's going. Jacob, what is your rating for season 2?
Yeah, so I have a
Of
lot of issues with it that I've kind of hinted at already. That doesn't take away though from the fact that I really like the world. I've always been a huge fan of post-apocalyptic stuff. I think it is like the coolest setting, especially when it's like involving like zombies or infected and stuff like that. I have just always been drawn to it. So there's still a lot of things I really enjoy. I think the supporting roles in this are so strong that even though our lead actor wasn't quite there. I feel like they were able to lift up the scenes a lot, and I didn't really get fully taken out of them. I might get frustrated with the acting, but I never was like so mad that I was like, I don't even want to watch anymore. Like, I don't even want to see her make decisions. I was still interested in what they were going to do. A lot of the fun for me has been, what are they going to change from the video game? Because there's been quite a few things that have been changed, some for the better, like some things I have liked better, some I haven't. And we'll definitely talk about probably the biggest one that I had a complaint with this season. And it's kind of a small moment, but I think it's a really, really, maybe one of the biggest impacts in the whole show that they changed, which I was not a fan of. But overall, I have my complaints, but I still think the story is fun. I still think that the visuals are amazing. I think the acting is still really strong for the most part. So it is definitely a step down from season 1, which I probably would have rated season 1 a 10. I don't remember if we did a season 1 rating, because I know we both watched it and then we talked about it on the show, but I don't think we ever did a full breakdown, did we?
No, we didn't do a full breakdown because we watched it at separate times, but we did
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I would have given season 1 a 10. Like, I think season 1 is that good. I think everything is perfect with season 1 compared to the video game. It's really like 1-to-1 for me. Really enjoyed it. Season 2 takes quite a few points off, so I'm going to give season 2 a 7. I don't think it's deserving of a 6, which is where I'm on the verge of giving it that. Like, and I feel like a lot of that though is just me being a little bit of a hater mentality of, I've really tried not to be, we hear people that read books about movies all the time. They're like, oh, the book is so much better than the movie. I didn't want to be like that with this. I didn't want to be like, oh, the game is so much better than the show. It's not even worth watching the show. La-di-da-di-da. I did not want to do that. And so I really tried to go into it with an open mind, tried to embrace some of the changes and stuff like that. So I'm going to give it a 7. I still think it was deserving of that with all the other things that we got. But those things that we didn't get is where I definitely take it a few points off.
Well, 7, I think that's a good rating, but big old hater coming in here. I would have probably gave the first season a 9, just because of some of the overarching themes that were in the first season that I didn't love as much. I thought it was spectacular and very fun to watch. However, just not entirely epic. I'm gonna give this season a 6. And
Yeah.
I feel like I may be being a little gracious with some of the with my rating because of some of those other episodes that I think really carried just as good standalone TV in and of themselves, and some of the side performances in this season that really stood out for me. I think just the overall over the top gruesomeness in some of the scenes really hurts it for me. The overall story, the overall story, not. Oh man, yeah. Jacob's like, you know what? Actually, I remember that sickle entering that stomach.
Yeah,
and
that's what got it off the 6 for me.
Yeah,
that's what got it off the 6.
The intestines hanging down from the naked men in the rafters was really what Jacob driving it up to a 7. Oh goodness. But so that kind of took it down for me. The overall themes, the LGBT front running storyline, the not completion of an actual story, the complete and total lack of reason, and I cannot wait to talk about my biggest complaint with this season, and it happened in the finale. And then the terrible cliffhanger, which I think is just awful. So all of those dropping it down to a 6. Pedro, thank you for saving this show and bringing it up to a 6. Because without those 2 episodes with those flashbacks centered on him, then I would probably be dropping this pretty far lower than this. So 6 for me.
Like I said, I was right on the verge of giving it a 6, but I feel like a lot of my complaints have been knowing what is happening is why I'm frustrated with the show. I think it also does help me a little bit because I do know what is going to happen and how the show is going to tie together. And looking at it from that point of view, like the cliffhanger is really, really annoying, but it is kind of like, okay, at least it is a cliffhanger because we at least know we're getting a third season. So like some of those things helped me a little bit. So I'm completely understanding of the 6. Like I was so close to giving it 1. But I just feel like some of those other themes, and I just like the post-apocalyptic world, all that stuff. I'm really excited for what's to come too, is also helping me because I think once we get farther into the show, I don't necessarily think it'll make this season better, but it'll make this season have been more tolerable. So I think that is part of the point where it does help if you have played the game and know the source material.
Yeah, and I get that. And I understand that what's coming may be good, but I just got to rank it on what we've been given. And like,
Hmm.
I don't think there's any surprises coming for me. I don't think I'm that dense to not see what they're trying to project in season 3 and who they're trying to focus on and how they're going to try to manipulate the audience. But I don't know if they can redeem what was done in this one. But I guess we'll see. Half the audience will not see though, because we dropped over 50%
Yes.
of the viewing audience. So they're gonna have to pick it up in season 3 if they're gonna want to season 4. I would suggest closing the book on this show after season 3.
I think honestly, if you did skip season 2 and just hop right back into season 3, you might not really have missed too much because like we've talked about a little bit. Not a lot happened this season, except for one big moment, which you can just watch that
Yeah.
episode alone and
Yeah,
probably
watch
be
it.
fine to move on.
Yeah, watch episode 2 and episode 7, and you'll be
Yep.
solid.
You're probably good to go. But yeah, no, I get I think your 6 is like I said, I was right there with you. But I think we'll see what happens with the upcoming seasons. I think for me, a big point is going to be like, when does it get announced? When is the release date for this third season? Because I think that's going to help me a little bit with their thing. Like if I don't even think they've started filming, but maybe they have, and maybe we're getting on. It'll be closer than we realize. Maybe it's only a year and a half out or something like that, and not 2.5. I think that could help a little bit, but yeah, I think a
Yeah.
6 is perfectly justified.
All right. Well, with that 6 being delved out in historical fashion, uh, what do you uh, what do you think about jumping into spoilers?
Yeah, I think it's about time because it's hard to talk about the show without talking about the big moment.
And everyone who is listening to this show is like, hard to talk about it. You just talked about it for 30 minutes. How in the world was that difficult? But it was. It was difficult for me. So anyway, yeah, Joel dies. So
Yep. Yep.
I think that's really where this downfall of the show started. I understand what they're trying to go through, but really terrible, terrible move for me personally. And I think most fans would resonate with that, as their
Yep.
viewership has noted.
Yeah, and this is a big problem with the second game. People were very upset when this happened. It really almost also happens for no reason. We do understand what they're doing with it, but just the way it happens, which it does happen pretty similarly in the game, it just happens all a little bit too fast. That it doesn't really let you kind of grasp what is actually happening, which is a complaint for me. Like if you're going to have a character that is, and I hinted at this when we talked about season 1 a little bit, Joel is not the main character of the show. But when you've portrayed him as it up to this point almost, and then you just kind of take it away from us that quick, that's where it's like, I don't really like that because I didn't get to feel like I said a goodbye. You want someone like that to almost have like a heroic ending. You know, you want them to go out swinging. This kind of like dropped him down to his knees, and it does make it emotional. But at the same time, you're like, I really don't like the way it happened. And so I think that definitely felt through, like continued with how the game was played. A lot of people were really mad when that happened. And I think a lot of people were really mad with the show as well. I know my wife in particular almost wanted to quit watching because she didn't even care about anything else other than Pedro Pascal's character. So I kind of get that. I think, like you said, a lot of the viewership dropped off as well. So a lot of people must have felt that way. And all the rumors about if they were going to change that in season 2 and let Joel live, they got put to bed pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, put to bed with a abrupt start. I agree that it came out of nowhere. It seems unnecessary. And we were talking with a coworker, and they're like, why does it matter? Like, what's it matter if he died? Why do you care about Joel? Why don't you care about Abby? And it's like, well, this is the character that I just spent 9 hours with. Like, this is the character that I was interested in correcting what we all would say is a wrong thing to do. And so getting stripped from that and then holding back. Let's talk about the flashback positioning. Why in the world did they not put episode 6 as episode 2? Like let's let us sit with that. Like how much more impactful would episode 2 have been if we would have known episode 6? Like, and I know the people who are playing the video game understand that, but as a viewer, that is frustrating. And that would, like, who didn't know, I think that is terrible placement. And that may be how the video game does it. I'm not positive, but I think that was atrocious. Like, very bad, very poor manipulation. And then like I think they just realized how much they needed Pedro, and they're like, hey, if we put Pedro in this, episode 8 or episode 6, then we'll get a few viewers back. Like honestly, that's what I'm thinking when I'm watching that episode.
I will say the game and the show do follow a pretty similar timeline. There's not any moments that happened really in the show that were super different. There's a few small scenes that are a little bit out of place. One thing in particular, I'll go ahead and talk about it, is Isaac. I don't know if you remember that character, but one of the WLF, like the main sergeant of the WLF
Yeah.
that we get that. We would not have known him at this point in the game. So that's one of the things that they did bring forward a little bit, was trying to set up him and his character a little bit more leading into this third season, which I don't really necessarily hate it. I don't not like it. Like it's not like I don't love it. Like it's a smaller thing in my opinion, because nothing really happens with his character. It's just an earlier introduction. But for the most part, the game and the show do follow a pretty similar timeline.
How do you feel about Isaac's inclusion at this point in the game or in the show?
Like I said, in the game we hadn't been exposed to him yet. We didn't know who he was. So having him a few episodes earlier, like a few, I don't know, timeline wise, a little earlier, I don't necessarily hate it, because I think the actor's really good. I forget his name too. I'm having a terrible job with actors' names today. I think he's awesome. Like, I think he does a really good job. I'm excited to see more of his character. We don't really get a whole lot of him, but I do like, kind of like, you're going to laugh, the gruesomeness of his character, because it is portrayed well from the game to this. Like, I think that scene where we see him capture the one Seraphite member, and he's talking about like his past and how he wanted to be a cook and how he really wanted to have this set of pans, but he didn't ever expect that he'd be using the pans to torture somebody else. Like, I thought that was kind of a really impactful scene. I think that's where the writing in this show really does shine, is in those small moments between character and character, kind of getting more backstory on like how the apocalypse has changed people, right? He just, a lot of these characters would have just been normal everyday people, but because of what they had to do to survive, they turned into these gruesome villains. And so a lot of that writing I enjoy, and having his character brought forth a little bit earlier, I don't necessarily hate, don't love it. It was kind of just oh, he's here a little earlier than we were expecting. And so I didn't really necessarily hate it, but I did like getting to see his actor, portray the character. And it does have me, again, it's one of those things I'm more excited for what's to come, because I know a little bit of how it's going to go moving forward.
Yeah, it's cool to see Jeffrey Wright on screen and not just hear his voice as the watcher. I kind of agree. I don't personally love what I see from his change from Fedra to Wolf. I would have liked to have, if he's willing to do that to Fedra, I feel like maybe he understood like the brutality, and like the brutality that they were doing was incorrect, and the oppression that they were doing was wrong. And then I don't know, I feel like there may be a little too far swing in the opposite direction for the character that we've been shown. If the first time we meet the character, he's so appalled by the monsters that are doing this abusing of normal citizens, is willing to blow up a truck full of his soldiers, and then all of a sudden he like has no compassion at all, and is putting frying pans on people, and just like keeping them chained up naked in the kitchen as he's beating the mess out of him, cutting hands off. I feel like that's just like that swings a little hard for a character without really understanding what went into it and not focusing on him. So I even feel like that maybe should have been saved for potentially if he is in, like, if he would have had a spin-off or something. I just feel like that's wasted time focusing on him when we're not making any progress in the story. So that's kind of my issue with his appearance.
See, I personally I've always been a huge fan of, like, when we first get introduced to a character, seeing them do something like crazy like that. I really like the introduction of him, just like seeing, oh, this guy's just cold-blooded, right? He's just going to do whatever he has to do. He doesn't care if that's a van full of his own soldiers, because we don't really know him at that point. So I kind of like when we get those kind of character introductions, because it sets the tone early for what they're going to be. And it goes back to what I was saying, like, you kind of get to see how the apocalypse does shift people. Where we're at now, he's doing things a little bit differently. Maybe he cares a little bit more about the people that he does have left, because ultimately at this point in your life, there's going to be less soldiers alive, less people alive as the apocalypse continues to go on. So your morals are going to change more. Sometimes they're going to be better for the worse. all that stuff. So I like that introduction to his character. But like you kind of hinted at, like nothing really happens with his character that it makes you feel like he needed to be introduced yet.
Yeah, but I think he was fine. I do think he's a great actor. But
Mm.
I just, again, like you just said, say maybe a little too premature on the introduction of him. Uh, I want to go ahead and jump a little bit forward to my biggest issue with the show in the finale, and I just want to hear your take on this because it's been on my mind, and I can't really hold it in much longer. So we get Ellie's vengeful rage, and we're jumping a long ways in the future, and she jumps on a boat to cross Typhoon Bay.
Mm.
Storm's coming in. She's driving across to get to what she presumes is Abby. A 40-foot wave comes and crashes her boat, capsizes it. She then swims full gear and backpack with boots on, and if you've ever swam with clothes on, you know how difficult that is. Not only did she swim like that, at least at least 60 feet. And I'm being very generous with that. It was probably more like 100 yards uh, at minimum. In full gear, didn't drown, gets out of the water, is fine in a typhoon. Her boat is perfectly upright beside it. She gets dragged into the forest, hanged. And then in the nick of time, she gets dropped to her feet. She's perfectly fine to run to the boat, get the boat, start the engine, which starts without any issue, and then proceeds to immediately drive back into the bay that she just got, thrown around like a doll in, and then proceeds to pull her butt up on the dock, climb up to a second story window, break into an aquarium, and find these two people. Like, did you have any issues with that?
Yeah, that's one of the points that they changed in the game. That doesn't happen. We actually don't get introduced to that island, really. We do get a little bit of it in earlier in the season when we see them in the forest. We don't get introduced to it like that at all until the game at this point. So that was one of the changes that they made that a lot of people have been complaining about, because so much just things happening just to make it work happen. All those complaints are so valid, and I was so frustrated with that scene as well. Like, any normal person would see this terrible storm and be like, you know what? I'm gonna wait till tomorrow, right? And this is, again, goes back to one of those things. It's like video game to live action show. Video game, if you die, you respawn, right? Who cares if I die on this boat? Oh well, on to the next part of the mission. Real life, not working the same. So when you bring something like from a video game and you try to bring it over to live action, you have to think about those things like, would a person actually do this? And obviously their whole point behind this is to show how fueled by rage she is to get revenge on Abby. But it does get to the point where no matter how angry you are, you're going to be like, this is not, I can be angry tomorrow. And that's kind of like the biggest. That might be one of my second biggest complaint with the show, because I'll talk on mine here in a second. Was that whole scene? That scene was so frustrating. The explosion happening at the perfect time. We know these people are cold-blooded killers. You talked about it earlier on. They're just going to slice your guts open and leave you be. But you know what? We're just going to say to leave this one, right? We got to go. We're not just going to slice them open real quick and go on our way. This could be an enemy, right? These people that seem to be very smart, know the woods, are prepared for this type of stuff. Now we're just going to leave a potential enemy that's got weapons and stuff here on the ground. Like, we'll come back later. She'll still be there. I think those were a lot of the things that I was like, what are we doing? Like, those are some of the issues that I had, that I feel like they changed it to almost add more anticipation. And like, they almost feel like, oh, it's a finale. We need another big moment to happen. And this one was really, really did not stick. It was really bad.
Yeah, and Tommy just magically appears also in the aquarium. Like, how did he get across the Typhoon Bay? Like, there,
He probably swam.
Yeah, he probably swam. He took the 3-foot John boat. She
Yeah.
took the 8-foot John boat.
He
took
rode the horse
3-foot.
across.
Yeah, he surfed it. Yeah, I had an issue with that. You talked about the fueled by rage, and I can be angry tomorrow. One of the things that really infuriated me was the fact that she said that she loved Dina and that she cared for her, and yet when she found out that she was pregnant and carrying another life, and honestly found out that she had feelings with her, there was no like, you know what? Maybe I should protect the what I have left. Like there like some self-preservation, some protecting of those that I actually do love, especially one who is as vulnerable state as a pregnant woman who is on this journey with you. Like, how am I supposed to take you seriously as a character when you are willing to put the ones you love in so much danger time after time again? Like, I just don't care about you anymore. Like, you're no longer important. If you're willing to sacrifice everyone around you for the sake of vengeance, I just can't resonate with you as a character. I can't understand your rage. I don't, and you're just like, it's beyond the point of reason. And to me, like, you walk up and you see, like, they show how many tanks and how many, like, how much they have, and it's two little girls, two teenage girls, and you're like, one of them's pregnant, and you're like, you know what? I still got this. Like, the amount of mind numbing stupidity that is going on in Ellie's head has made this almost unwatchable. Because I understand that it's a video game, like you said, yeah, you can take off you two on 80 and you can try that 75 times, and like on the
Yeah.
76 you succeed and like it was awesome. But no, one straight bullet to the head and you're dead. You're going up
Yeah.
against tanks. Like, this is stupidity. And so I just don't think I just had a real big issue with this season because I just cannot get behind vengeance being the driving force to make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, especially with someone that she was pissed at. Like, she wasn't even happy with. Like, and she understands why he was killed. Like, he gets it. She gets it. And then she's still just like, I don't care. I'm gonna kill you all. And I just, if you could do like that, then you wouldn't have been mad at him. Like, it just, there's no consistency here. And to me,
Well,
that's all very frustrating.
another thing I think is funny is going back to the consistency thing. We see Jesse, them have that moment in the theater after they've had that argument. And she's like, why did you come find me in the aquarium? And he's like, well, because I think he says you would have burned like heaven and earth to find me. No, she wouldn't have. She
No,
just
not even
proved
for a
by
second.
not going after Tommy, who is literally the next in line to take care of her, right? Like, her basically dad's brother, her uncle. She just proved that she don't care enough to go after him when he's in trouble. So I thought that was a moment where I was like, what is going on? Like, this is where the writing, and this is part of the issue with the second game, is people felt like the writing was very inconsistent and didn't make sense. And I don't think Ellie or Bella Ramsey does a good job of portraying the emotion. You brought up the video game version of that scene that you saw, and the video game version of Ellie does have a lot more emotion. It almost leads you not necessarily to agree with the decision she's making, but gives you more of an understanding of why she's doing that. And that's where I feel like the emotion that wasn't in these scenes this season really hurts. Like, you can't resonate with the character at all because the acting is not there to like make you believe like, oh, she really is angry. Like, this does make sense. It just almost feels like she's been told, hey, no matter what, you have to act like you need to go kill Abby. And she took that like really directly. Like, her one goal for the rest of her life is to do that. And that's a part of the game too, but you do have those other like emotion subplots and stuff like that that kind of make it work a little bit better. Again, the second game wasn't as well as received as the first game. I didn't like it as much as the first game, but those things are in there. I just feel like the show did an even worse job than the game did.
Which is saying something because,
Yeah.
oof, I mean, I know, like, inconsistency is one thing, and I love how you talked about Jesse there and how she literally abandoned Tommy. That's such a great point. Like, what a piece of trash. But even
Mhm.
when she's not fueled by rage in these entirely, like, ridiculously over the top moments, she's an unlikable character in the flashbacks. Like, I don't like her in the episodes where Joel is trying to take care of her. And like, I don't like her before. Like, she's an unlikable protagonist. It is really hard to choose here for someone who not only is making the worst decisions you've ever seen a human make, but also she's just unlikable. And oh man, all of this led to maybe I need to rate this thing a freaking 5. This is bad.
I think let's go ahead and we'll talk about the biggest issue that I had in the show, and it is a change from the game, and it's a big plot point to me, but they almost make it seem as a smaller point of the show, and it's when we finally get the scene of Abby confronting or Ellie confronting Joel about after we have the scene where Joel pushes the guy down that was causing an issue in the like the dance thing for the New Year thing. We see them finally have that conversation about what really happened in like I forget where they were. Was it Seattle? I don't think it was Seattle. Anyway, when
Denver.
Joel does Denver, whenever we see Joel does kill the whole Firefly group, and she goes through and she's like, "Did you kill them all?" And he's crying. Very emotional scene. I think the acting was phenomenal in this scene. But the biggest part of the issue with here is when she says, "Could they have made a cure?" And he nods his head yes. In the game, he says, "I don't know," and that makes a whole lot more sense as to why he would have done what he did, right? If he doesn't know, they were not sure that a cure could be made, well, do you want to risk somebody's life just for a chance at something? Maybe not, especially someone that you've become emotionally attached to. If this is like your daughter, you're not just going to give them to a doctor that thinks they can do it. You would want to know with 100% certainty that their life is going to be used to fix things. And the fact that they changed that from the game, I really had a problem with that. That was my biggest complaint from the show to the game, was that change in particular. The fact that Joel said, yeah, they could have. When they definitely don't. In the game, he literally says, I don't know. I don't think they, like, there's no surety when she asks that question in the game, but in the show, he nods his head yes. I think that's a really big point, that it's basically the driving force for what happened in season 1 was him not knowing, but we kind of just tossed that out the window by him nodding his head yes.
Right, and they told him that they didn't know if they could do it, but if there's a chance, they have to try. And like I didn't know that was a change from the video game, but I was pissed about that too. I was like, you did not know. You didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know. How could you know? And like, oh, dude, I was the exact same way. And now I'm even more furious knowing they changed that from the game. Holy cow.
Yeah. It's just like, it's one of those things that, like, why did you change that? Did you think it would hit harder if he killed all these people in cold blood? And like, maybe you do. Like, this show is kind of one of the underlying like emotions of this show is selfishness. Like, we see Ellie is very selfish. Like, she has her agenda in mind and she wants to do it. Were they trying to make it seem like she got that from Joel? I don't know. I don't know if that's the point they wanted to prove a little bit more in the show than they did in the game. But that was a big complaint that I had. It was my biggest complaint as far as the translation from the source material was.
And we know that Joel is selfish and that he's looking out for number one, but he's also looking out for Ellie. And I think that's really important. If she would have said, like, I know I'm going to die, and that's okay, and then he still killed everyone, then yes, absolutely the most selfish person in the entire world. I think that's really important to know, that she did not know she was going to die, and under no circumstances did she think that surgery was going to kill her. They didn't tell her, like, hey, this may kill you, hey, this is like a potential, like, this is one of the side effects, death. Like, they didn't know that. And so I've had people argue that, like, oh yeah, like she knew, or like that's so selfish to save her life. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe he just saved her life for something that wouldn't have done. Like, her cure is so unreasonably crazy that who in the world would be able to think that they could replicate that by killing her? And I just, dude, I cannot get behind someone saying that he was entirely selfish. Now, there was a big portion of selfishness in that, but if someone's going to try to kill my daughter over something that they think they can help someone else with, screw you, buddy. No chance. Like, like that ain't happening. I do the same thing.
Yeah, that was my biggest complaint, and especially when she does the whole reaction, well, like, that was my purpose. Like, you took away my purpose in life. It might not have been your purpose. Like, maybe him doing that and then prolonging your life and letting them get more advanced with their research. Maybe ultimately you will get to the point that it's a for sure thing. Like, we know if we can find something to fight this cure, we can make a cure. Like, we can make the cure for it. Like, we can fight this disease with this cure. But they just don't know at that point. And so that's why I didn't like that he nodded his head yes there. Again, it is a small moment and a lot of people might have overlooked it. But for me, I was like, oh, I don't like that change at all.
Well, I definitely am on board with you there. That is, I think, I haven't played the games, and I can already tell you that that is definitely the worst change from the game because, like you said, that is so crucial and so important and very character driving. And if they
Mm-hmm.
are just in the zone of like, let's make Joel look worse and worse, then like uh, I don't get it. Like you understand how hurt his pain is, and I was really looking forward to seeing him grow from his decisions and kind of sit with some of the consequences. Like, okay, yeah, you do lose Ellie because you didn't let her have autonomy. Like, let's see how you deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
But nah, golf club to the neck. So
Yeah. And I do think they did a good job too with like in that scene after all that moments, like Ellie's like, I can't forgive you for this, but I want to try to. Like I think it's a good wrapping up scene. Like she's gonna be very mad at him, but she still does love him to the point where she's like, I don't want to just not have you in my life. And we do see that
yeah,
kind of throughout like the whole first part of the season is her just hating him. She doesn't want him in his life. She's sick and tired of dealing with him. But like it kind of does come with a sense of like, I kind of get it because he has lied to her a lot. And I think that's one of the strong points of this season, though. Let's get back to some of the positivity here. Is I think they do a good job of kind of portraying why Ellie is so mad at him. He does lie to her a lot, and it's kind of a theme of his character of if he thinks something should be done a certain way, then that's the only way to do it. We go back to the scene where he finds the therapist's husband in the woods when they get called out on their first recon, and he's been bit, and Ellie does the whole thing, which she does have experience with because she's been a part of the Fireflies. They did the same thing. Can you count to 10? If you can count to 10, you have time to live. Like you have time. There's probably they didn't explain this part. Maybe they should have, but you have a certain amount of time to live. Maybe they know based off of that if you have 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. And then he said, okay, I promise you I will not kill him. And then, 5 minutes later, he does it because he thinks that's what's supposed to be done. And you can go back with it back and forth on this one. That is, the way they're supposed to do things. You don't bring an infected back, but don't promise that to a character that you've already lied to. So I kind of get her frustration, which I think is one of the parts that they did a good job with in this season, was kind of giving us a reason to understand a little bit of why she's so frustrated with them. And that part I kind of enjoyed, is at least they did give us those scenes to try to help us. And again, we don't like Ellie. She's a very dislikable character based off what we've seen so far. But at least they kind of try to give you a little bit of understanding as to where she's coming from.
well, it's so funny because you get that moment. You're like, oh, dang it, Joel. Why would you do that? Why would you lie there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
lying is not good. Like we all know, lying is bad. Lying is sin. Stop lying. Um, and so I'm like on board with you there, and I'm like, yeah, that's awful. Okay, great. We get to see Ellie lie, and we're gonna get this moment where she has to hold it in here, and then she just blows up on him when they get back,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be really impactful and really understanding. And then instead of blowing up on Joel, she doesn't only hurt Joel. She's like, I'm gonna hurt her as well. Like I'm gonna hurt everyone in this situation. I'm gonna hurt Joel's reputation. I'm gonna hurt his wife. I'm just gonna it's all gonna go down in flames. So instead of like taking her very personal feelings and talking to them appropriately with Joel at a time, like she could have said that at any time
Mm-hmm.
on that ride back. But instead she chose to choose the absolute worst time and not only ruin like her relationship with Joel in that moment by inducing outside factors with it, like because now Joel's on the defensive. You're not even bringing this at me as your own ammunition. You're hurt. You're using other people to attack me too. Like why in the world? I just she's so unlikable. What a terrible decision. Like I agree.
Yeah.
Like that was good writing. Like great moment, great build up. Perfect. All right, we understand the frustration. Joel's a liar, just like Ellie. Like we get it. Yeah. And then she tells it in front of the wife, and it ruins the entire moment for me because now I'm back on board with Ellie's the worst.
Yeah. And I think goes back to, one of the points I wanted to bring up, that a big part of the second game is when you do get into Seattle for the very first time. This is when the game became almost like a little bit of an open world atmosphere, right? You're given the freedom to explore Seattle. Like, hey, go check out some of the sites. You're going to have some conversations with Dina along the way as you like search through things. You're going to find some gear that you're going to need later on in the game. that part's really fun, and that's part of a video game, right? That makes sense. This is where I think this season struggled a little bit because the first game, very linear, right? So the first season of the show has a storyline that they can stick to. They can follow this path. You don't have to worry about filling in spots, which is where this part of the season really struggled, because in the game, you have this whole world you're just exploring. You're going around checking out stuff. You can't do that in a show. So you have to kind of make a linear path forward, and sometimes it's for the detriment of the show, which is how this one definitely was. I do think as we go into this next season, based off where they left off and what should be happening, we should get back onto a more linear path, which I think will definitely help. And that's kind of where I was saying, like, I think what they did with this season was so rough because of it being a video game. And I think one of the high praises I have for Fallout, another video game adaptation, that game is basically 100% open world. There is no linear. You can go do whatever you want, just about whenever you want to. And that's why I was so impressed with that show, is they put you in situations that you would have found yourself in this open world, right? It felt like it was straight out of the video game, even though you can't really construct that because every player probably had a different experience with that part of the game because it's open world. And I feel like that's a big part of where this season struggled, is they didn't quite give you that sense of, oh, I could have seen myself running into that same situation when I was exploring. Everything felt really forced. And I think that's like, it goes back to the whole video game versus TV show comparison. It's hard to make that work when you are given this whole world to explore, but in a show, you can't really do that. So that's kind of why I was a little bit more reserved. It's like, I kind of understand the situation they had put themselves in, but I still think they could have done a better job of getting us there.
Yeah. And I guess I'm glad that I haven't played the video game because I don't have that perspective and I'm just allowed to look at it like from where it's at. But I get that perspective, and I definitely think that's a valid complaint with, you can't structure something linear without direct intentionality behind it. So I get that. So, but man, ugh. Now I'm just thinking about dropping it to a 5.
Before this might be our first mid-show adjustment to a rating, which I think is very valid, because it's sometimes hard to rate something when you haven't sat down and actually discussed it with somebody else.
Yeah, and I sit and pondered it for a while. I kept thinking those episodes were good enough to bring it up, and the visuals, and so I'm gonna leave it. But internally, I'm selling myself. Man, that should have really been a 5.
Oh man, but
you got anything else to say before we wrap up the show?
No, I do want to say this, though. As much, I feel like this was very negative. If you were one of those people that did stick with the rest of the season, and I know we said, what was it, a 50%? I think it was 55% drop off or something like that. It was it was a little higher than the actual 50% that we've used a couple of times. If you did get through the second season, I would recommend you that you stick around and give season 3 a shot. Even though the ending was very frustrating with season 2, I think there's a lot of good that is about to happen with the show. The game started to kind of catch its stride a little bit again with where we're getting to. If you've enjoyed some of the characters that we haven't seen a whole lot of, we are going to get more of them. Obviously, I don't think that's a spoiler because they wouldn't have shown them at all if they, were just nobodies, right? We're going to get some more of the Isaac stuff. We're going to get more of the Abby stuff. So I definitely think it's worth sticking around if you were able to stick it out. If you didn't stick it out, again, I really do think you should try to make yourself watch the rest of this, because I still think there is some good to come with the rest of the show. The world is really good. I think we're going to have a really fun time with the next season. Again, hopefully it doesn't take as long to get there as I'm thinking it's going to be. Hopefully it's really not like a 2.5, 3 year wait. I really hope that's not the case. But I do think if you did make it this far, and even if you didn't, I do recommend you stick around a little bit, because while I don't think it'll ever reach what season 1 did, I do think there were still some really good points that the second game did. It still won a ton of awards. It was still a very highly, proclaimed video game. So I think it's definitely worth sticking around, because I still think there's a lot of good and a lot of excitement that's going to come with the rest of the show.
Oh. Well, that's a good optimistic point of view, and I definitely can see the show going up, especially with my rating. Obviously,
not hard
to, not too hard to beat a 5. But yeah, that's a good positive message to leave off with. Sorry I was so negative. You guys know me. That's just kind of how I am sometimes. But I appreciate you guys sticking around, enjoying listening to you. Enjoy listening to us. Hopefully you do. If you do, drop a subscribe, give us a rating, tell us what you thought of Last of Us. Am I just completely off base here, or are we dead on the money? I bet I know where y'all are thinking we are at. But without further ado, thank you guys so much for sticking around, and we cannot wait to catch you guys in the next weekly fix.